Welcome to Focus on Albany. I'm Cynthia Pooler, and my guest today is David Lombardo from the Capitol Press Room. And we're going to talk about the redistricting and the primaries, and something fell down there, and politics in general. So, David, from my perspective, in all the years that I've been watching and participating in politics, I've never seen anything this messed up before. The redistricting thing is still a mess. What do you think?
Well, I think you're right to say that we've never seen anything like this in New York because for decades, this has been a process where the legislature has had carte blanche to draw lines as it saw fit. There was essentially an unwritten or maybe even written understanding between the Assembly and Senate that they would each draw their own lines and then approve the lines in the other house. But in the wake of the redistricting process that set up the 2012 lines, there was a constitutional amendment that created a new system, a commission that would be tasked with drawing the lines. And while that commission could be circumvented, which the legislature tried to do, they also added language to the Constitution that spoke about the problem of partisan gerrymandering, essentially drawing lines to specifically favor or advantage one party over another. And it's that language in the Constitution that really hamstrung their efforts to redraw the congressional lines. And so that's really what this problem stems from. And because of this language of the Constitution, we've had successful court challenges to the lines that had been drawn by the legislature. And like you said, we're in uncharted territory that is fun for reporters to cover, but a real headache if you are someone who wants to either run for Congress or state Senate and are getting your political boundaries just days before you might have to start a new petitioning, and really just June, July, August, 3 months before the primary.
So, if congressional candidates have to repetition, they only have to repetition in the areas that are new to them, correct?
So not quite. So if you are a candidate who submitted valid signatures back in the early spring to run for Congress, those petitions are still valid if even if you want to run for a different district. They made it very convenient that way. The people who are going to have to collect now are the people who are now running for a different level of office or hadn't even previously planned on running for office. Some examples of that would be former New York City Mayor Bill de Blasio, who has now said he wants to run in the newly created 10th congressional district. That means he's going to actually have to go out and collect signatures in a process that began basically the second after the new lines were formulated. Another person who's going to have to draw on her supporters to actually get signatures is Yuleen New, an assembly member from the Manhattan area who originally was going to run for state Senate and is now saying she's going to run for Congress as well. But other candidates, say like congressional member Mondaire Jones, who lives in the Hudson Valley region and is now going to be running in a New York City district, he will not need to collect new signatures because he already collected valid signatures earlier this year.
It seems as though it was redrawn where incumbents are facing one another
Mm-hmm.
in primaries, and from what I've been reading, it's been getting pretty ugly.
Yeah, so when the lines have been drawn in the past, especially by the legislature, there has been some deference to incumbents, especially making sure that they don't need to square off against each other. And that was largely avoided in 2012 when a court appointed special master, for lack of a better word, because that's the title we're using now, drew congressional lines that did not put people in the same districts. This go around, it's pretty clear that whoever was drawing the boundaries, well, we know who it is, Jonathan Service, didn't really take into consideration where people lived. He was trying to make compact districts modeled largely after what the redistricting commission did. And like you said, it has resulted in some intra-party and inter-party
Mhm.
challenges. We're going to see some Democrats and Republicans potentially squaring off against each other in primaries. For instance, in the Capital Region, we have a Senate seat that's currently represented by Daphne Jordan, but a Republican senator, a fellow Republican, Jim Tedisco, who lives nearby and previously represented large parts of Saratoga, has said, no, I think I'd like to run in that district too. So that sets up for a primary. Down in Congress, down in Manhattan, Brooklyn area, you've got Carolyn Maloney and Jerry Nadler, who are both eyeing the same congressional seat, setting up a potential run. And then you have some potential general election people who are going to face each other in the Hudson Valley. Michelle Hinchy, who lives in Ulster County, and Sue Serino, who lives in Dutchess County, that's a Democrat and Republican respectively, are likely to square off in a state Senate race. So there's going to be some interesting races. Some people were lucky. They got to avoid primaries. For instance, in Rochester, the way the city was divided, it kept Democratic incumbent state senators Jeremy Cooney and Summer Brook in separate districts. Same is to be seen in Syracuse, where Rachel May, who lives in Syracuse, and John Mannion, who lives in a town just outside of the city, were put in separate districts. In Buffalo, Sean Ryan and Tim Kennedy were kept out of the similar districts. So it was kind of a mixed bag, but it will definitely create some interesting matchups. But the thing to note is that, especially in the wake of redistricting, you don't need to live in the district you're going to run in. That's the case no matter when you're running in Congress. For state Senate, though, you can only do this right after redistricting. Afterwards, you actually need to live in the district.
But if you're running for Congress, and I mean, I could run for Congress in a district in Manhattan, but if I won, then I would have to move to
No,
Manhattan.
not
Oh,
not not in
really?
Congress. In Congress, you can live outside of it. Yeah.
Oh,
State Senate, in the Senate, though, you will need to move into it. Yeah.
so if I ran for a district in, like I said, Manhattan, and let's say I won, I could still live in Albany and govern from Albany?
Yeah, and so what we've seen in like a practical sense of this happening is people are elected living in a district to Congress, say, and they then end up making DC or a suburb of DC their permanent home, or basically that's their de facto home. And so you don't really live in the district necessarily. And the similar thing, though, on the state Senate side is the fact that you can run after redistricting, but you need to move in there within a certain time period of your reelection.
And I live in the 20th congressional district, and Paul Taco was drawn out of his district because he's from Amsterdam.
Correct.
So the, the word on the street that I heard was that he was thinking of moving to Albany, but he could still live in Amsterdam
Correct.
and govern from Amsterdam if he won.
Yeah. So, like you said, for listeners who might not be familiar with the geography there, his current district includes the eastern part of Montgomery County, stretches up to Saratoga Springs, and includes Albany County, Schenectady County, and reaches over into Rensselaer and grabs Troy and maybe one other municipality in Rensselaer County. The new lines include all of Saratoga County, Schenectady County, and all of Albany County, I believe, and just a couple towns in maybe I think it's Troy and maybe one other in Rensselaer County.
Mhm.
And like you said, he doesn't live in the district, but he's represented large swaths of the district for the last 10 years. So he's going to be able to run from outside the district and doesn't really need to move into it. Maybe he gets an apartment or something in Saratoga County or something like that, but he doesn't necessarily need to.
Even if he won again.
Yeah, that's my understanding. I could be wrong, but that's my understanding.
Okay. Now there was a newly drawn district that Sheriff Craig Apple is going to be running in. What's that Senate district? Where is it? What does it look like?
So the district you're referring to is one that stretches up into Washington County, includes Rensselaer County and the northeast corner of Albany County. So Colony, Cohoes. I'm trying to think what else is in that little tidbit. But so he is going to be potentially up against Rensselaer County's Andrea Smith, who had
Mhm.
announced earlier in the year that she was going to run when the district was one that included Rensselaer County, Saratoga County, and stretched into the north or the east corner of Schenectady County. She is the only Democrat who had previously announced for this new district. So this is a district that is, I would call Democratic leaning, but in a year like we have on store for us right now, I think this is one that Republicans are eyeing as a potential victory. Their candidate is likely going to be Assemblyman Jake Ashby, who is from the rural parts of Rensselaer County. In a presidential year, I think this district is one that is a winnable seat for Democrats. It's currently, at least and largely represented by Daphne Jordan, that Republican senator we mentioned earlier, who lives in the Half Moon Clifton Park area. Her district previously went from Saratoga County into Rensselaer County, and I believe down into parts of Columbia County. So this district really doesn't have an incumbent. So it'd be interesting to see Craig Apple, who is, I think, a centrist Democrat, maybe a conservative Democrat, depending on
Mhm.
how you think about it, versus Andrea Smith, who's running a little further to the left. He's somebody with a lot of institutional support from the party. So I think that's something that's going to rally behind him. But we've never seen him in a race like this where he actually has competition, at least not in my memory, and that goes back about a decade. So it'll be interesting to see, how does he connect with voters? How does he make a pitch for himself as a legislator and not someone who gets to run their own executive agency in the sheriff's office? So it'll be interesting, something to watch. And he would definitely shake up the makeup of the Democratic conference as a member of law enforcement, something we really haven't seen within the Senate Democrats since Eric Adams.
So, I I was always under the impression that he would be waiting for Breslin to retire.
Mm-hmm.
Okay, so is Breslin is not in this district that Craig
Correct.
Apple?
Correct. He's in a
Okay.
district that includes the rest of Albany County and stretches over into Schenectady County. Breslin is in the same district now that Republican Senator Jim Tedisco lives in, but this is a district that is much more Democratic. Democrats should be favored to win in it in the fall. Thus, we've seen Jim Tedisco gravitate towards this new Saratoga County district, even though it has a Democratic lean, is definitely one Republicans could win in the fall.
So it seems as if all of these new lines are giving incumbents a little bit of a headache. Wouldn't you say that would be true?
In some cases it's made them breathe a sigh of relief. For instance, out in Western New York, Pat Gallivan, a Republican senator, was potentially facing the prospect of a challenge against Tim Kennedy, and Tim Kennedy in a district that didn't necessarily favor the Democrat to Tim Kennedy. Now Tim Kennedy's in a pretty safe a blue seat. So I think that's a case where Tim Kennedy can breathe a sigh of relief. We saw Peter Oberacher, a recent addition to the Republican Senate conference from Central New York, originally set to square off against Jim Tedisco in a Republican primary. Because the way the lines were drawn in the final maps, Oberacher does not have a primary against Tedisco. That's likely Daphne Jordan. So it really depends on who you are on the state Senate side. And for Congress, it's the same thing. So Elise Stefanik, a North Country Republican, high profile, third ranking member of her conference in the House, basically has a smoother sailing now as the result of redistricting. And so it's really just kind of depends on who you are and where you live, whether these lines have been beneficial or hurtful.
There was a little bit of talk when the maps came out that Stefanik and Tonko would be challenging each other, but that's not the case, right?
Well, so while Tonko lives in Stefanik's district, because Amsterdam in Montgomery County has been put into her district, district that now stretches down to Schoharie County on the west and into Rensselaer County on the east. That district is heavily Republican, and Paul Tonko would lose if he ran against Elise Stefanik against that district in the fall.
Really?
Oh yeah, wouldn't be close.
So, wow, that's pretty interesting. So let's talk a little bit about the election. It seems as though the all of the candidates for governor are not really are not really getting their message out. I don't hear much from them. There's no commercials or anything. It's pretty quiet. Would you agree?
I think it depends where you are and who you're aligned with. For instance, I know that a lot of people in the capital region, young Democrats, are getting inundated on social media with ads for Kathy Hochul. They're seeing a lot of her pro-choice messaging on social media ads. And we've seen that Harry Wilson, a Republican candidate for governor, spent a lot of money on TV ads, and Tom Suozzi spent money on TV ads. And Kathy Hochul in recent weeks has been getting on TV. So it depends, where you are. So if you're living in, say, a more rural part of the state, it doesn't make a lot of sense to buy advertisements there because there's not as many voters there, and maybe not the right kind of voters if you're running in a Democratic primary. So if you're in New York City or the New York City suburbs or some of these larger TV markets upstate, there are going to be ads, say from Swazi or from Kathy Hochul. The public advocate, Jumaane Williams, has not gone on television. He, for large part, has not been doing a lot of outreach on the campaign side of things. On the Republican side of things, Harry Wilson and Lee Zeldin have bought TV spots. Andrew Giuliani is largely trying to get earned media, essentially getting press attention. Rob Astorino, a little bit of both. We haven't seen him up on TV in a significant way. He's still trying to desperately get that media attention. It is a little bit surprising that we haven't seen a real blitz now with the election just over a month away.
So how come Jumaane Williams has not made an effort to get in the media?
I think it's a couple things. I think one, with his personal life right now, he's got a lot going on. He's got a new child. His wife was dealing with severe health complications. And I think that definitely weighs, it puts a toll on you. I think that there is less willingness to give money to him so that he can actually go on television. I think he has less time and energy to actually try to raise that money. So I think that sort of contributes to the fact that without time and money, you can't really get on TV and you can't really make trips around the state the way, say, Tom Suozzi has. He's really been present, maybe to his detriment in Congress, where he's missed some votes. But Kathy Hochul has a lot of money and has been spending it now on some of these TV ads. So I think that's largely the reason why we haven't seen Jumaane Williams out in force or out on TV in a significant way.
I see. I'm looking at the signs that are on your wall. When are you going to take down the sign for Brian Benjamin?
That's a classic. Why would I take that down?
Wow. So, speaking of the lieutenant governor, what's going on with Delgado?
Well, what we're waiting for right now is the appointment of Delgado to actually be lieutenant governor. This is something that was announced weeks ago at this point, but hasn't been made official, largely due to a change in state law that requires a special election to be called within a certain time period of a vacancy being created. So in the past, you could have a vacancy and we could go months, if not a full year, before a election is held. We saw that with the case of Charles Barron's assembly seat when it was vacated. They put off filling it for months and months and months at the behest of Sheldon Silver. Now, if Delgado was to resign, you'd have to have a special election prior to when the primary is scheduled to held. So what we believe is happening, what the campaigns have indicated, is that the vacancy in the congressional seat and the appointment of him to lieutenant governor will happen at the end of May, and that'll coincide, I believe, with the August primary. I might have my dates wrong. It might be sometime in June, but that's when we're expecting that to happen, which will free up the possibility for a special election between likely Ulster County Executive Pat Ryan, a Democrat, and Dutchess County Executive Mark Molinaro, who then might square off again in the fall in a slightly redrawn congressional line. It's really almost a disservice to the voters how the governor has been so coy about when this is going to happen. She won't even acknowledge basically that there will be an August primary, even though her campaign is planning for that and appears to have some reassurances that that's when the special election will be held.
So, but the gubernatorial primary will be in June, right?
Correct. So, and
Okay.
Delgado will be on the ballot in June for the lieutenant governor primary.
So I heard some talk that if the primary was in August, that Cuomo was going to jump in. Did you hear that?
I hear that from people who aren't in corrected with Andrew Cuomo. Uh, it's as a reporter, someone who likes politics, I would love it if he ran. It would make lots of interesting stories. It would make my job a lot easier. The practical implications of it, though, something we've talked about, are really uphill, though, and he's not going to waste his time on a primary that he would not win, despite what a lot of the polling, sort of hints at, suggests, or kind of opens the door to. So the extra time, definitely would benefit someone like Tom Suozzi or Jumaane Williams, who gets more time to be out there, to be vocal. But at the same time, a lot of these campaigns have what's called a burn rate, where they're planning on like spending all their money by the June primary. So it'd be interesting to see if people could actually survive past June. We know Kathy Hochul could, because she's a fundraising machine. So that's kind of a double-edged sword for her. But she's indicated that she has no interest in moving this out of June. Maybe it's because of the fact that she's scared of Andrew Cuomo popping out like the boogeyman. But I also think it's largely because she doesn't want to give Tom Suozzi and Jumaane Williams additional runway to make their case against her.
So going back to the congressional seat for Delgado,
Mhm.
has there been any talk of Zephyr Teachout jumping into that?
Not that I'm aware of. I think she's pretty content in the AG's office. Plus, by my count, she's lost three times already for other offices, and it's hard to imagine someone rallying behind her for a fourth time in a credible way.
Hmm. So this has been a very interesting year. As a political junkie, you must be having a good time.
Oh yeah, I feel like I'm mainlining, political heroin or something. This is, really good stuff. I definitely enjoy myself, never bored. People say, you're worried about covering stories in the summer. It's like, no, there'll be plenty of news to cover in the summer. And it's been just an exciting time to be in Albany ever since 2009.
When I listened to your show, there was one elected official that's a bodybuilder. Can
Mm-hmm.
you tell me a little bit about that? That was an interesting interview.
Yeah, so on Fridays, we try to have a segment we call Poozer Pop Culture, where we kind of do lighter side of things, touch on the lives and interests of some of the policymakers in New York. And in that case, we were talking with Bronx Democrat Kenny Burgos, an assembly member who was elected recently. He's in his 20s, and he's an amateur bodybuilder. He competes in these physique competitions where he basically just struts his stuff, and he's a good looking young man in great shape, and it's something that he enjoys doing, and his colleagues enjoy kind of razzing him about it because of his diet and how he needs to be on such a low calorie count heading into these competitions,
Mm.
which was especially tough for him during the budget, which has a lot of late nights, a lot of snacking, a lot of calorie dense meals. So he was interesting, and I think he's going to try to, keep competing. He's 0 for 1 so far in his April match, but he would like to be an amateur with a couple wins under his belt.
As you were interviewing him, did you get the inspiration to become, a bodybuilder or go to the gym more often or
Uh,
change your diet?
No, I'm pretty content with my workout regime, Cynthia. I like to run. I like to play tennis, baseball, and a little basketball. I've actually played basketball with Asselian Burgos, and I'm able to hang with him. So whatever I'm doing is okay at this point. I'm probably could eat a little bit less, maybe take some calorie counting advice from him. But
Hmm.
I'm pretty happy with my workout. I find lifting weights to be pretty boring.
You do, really.
Yeah.
So, and then you also interviewed um, Todd.
Todd
I'm,
Kaminsky,
yes, and you
Bruce
talked about
Springsteen.
yes. That must
Yes.
have been fun.
Yeah, so State Senator Todd Kaminsky, a Long Island Democrat who's retiring at the end of this year, is a well-known Bruce Springsteen fan. And so for another Poozer Pop Culture interview, we had him on to talk about his love of Bruce Springsteen. And I had found an article that was written, I think, when he got married. And it referenced the fact that he had asked Bruce Springsteen for permission to play a song at his wedding because he had run into him. And we really fleshed that story out. And it was really fun to hear Todd Kaminsky just let loose and geek out on this story that he felt really passionate about. We even had to bleep him at one point because he dropped an F bomb, which was a little surprising. But it's really almost enlightening and insightful to hear these politicians talk about things that they are passionate about, to hear that side of things. And these are politicians who mostly come on my show to get grilled and to be held accountable for decisions and defend policies that they're trying to advance. So to get this other I guess point of view is helpful, to learn about these people as human beings and to understand what they care about, and get a feel for them as actual people. So I really enjoy it. And that was definitely an episode that I had a lot of fun with, just because of how passionate he was and what a good storyteller he was. It was an episode my mom, who's a Bruce Springsteen fan, really enjoyed. Although we shared it with a family friend who's a big Bruce Springsteen fan, and he took some issue with some of Todd Kaminsky's specific recommendations and picks about Bruce Springsteen. So it seems like those Bruce Springsteen fans are always really hard to please.
So it would have been interesting to have Preet on with Kaminsky. That would have been a really good show.
Yeah, the former federal prosecutor from New
Yep.
York City, a big Bruce Springsteen fan. I actually saw Preet at one of Bruce Springsteen's shows in Albany, and made him take a photo with me, because it was a time, I think, right after he had all the big indictments of Shelley Silver and Dean Skelos. The guy was kind of a rock star, and at least in the political circles.
Mhm.
So yeah, Preet is a big fan. And I actually asked Preet, actually asked Todd Kaminsky, who's a bigger fan, Preet or Todd, and he wouldn't weigh in on that. He deferred to Preet, who had a higher office in the
Mhm.
federal prosecutor landscape.
Well, Preet was at the Linda earlier in the day, and I
Mm.
had gone to that. So we have just about a minute left. Why don't you plug your show?
Well, you can listen to the Capitol Press Room and most upstate radio stations around New York. You can find the schedule at capitolpressroom.org under the About Us section. And if you want to just find your favorite episodes that way, go to capitolpressroom.org or wherever you download your favorite podcasts. This week, we'll be having some more of the redistricting fallout on the show. So definitely, if you didn't get enough of your fix here, I highly recommend you check out the Capitol Press Room for even more redistricting talk.
Thanks. You've been listening to Dave Lombardo and watching Dave Lombardo. I'm Cynthia Pooler. This is Focus on Albany. And if you like this show, please subscribe to my YouTube channel. Thanks, Dave. We'll talk again. And thank you, everybody, for watching and listening. Have a great day.